All right, hello and welcome. This is your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, and today we're going down the CompTIA PenTest Plus pathway. The last several videos have all been around the security analyst, the security operations center. So it's time to go back into offensive security and penetration testing, all the fun stuff. Today's video is going to be on Active Directory basics, and this is actually a free room, so you're more than welcome to tag along with us in this room as we go through all the exercises and the questions and stuff like that. There's even a virtual machine that's attached to this room that we're gonna use a little bit to kind of mess around with Active Directory. So please go ahead and do so if you don't already have a membership with TryHackMe. If you use the link in the description below, you'll actually get a discount on the paid membership with TryHackMe, which will give you access to a lot of the more advanced rooms. And the one right after the room that we're in right now is going to be breaching Active Directory. And that particular room, I don't believe, is a free room. So it's you have access to it for a limited time, it says. 650 are in here, or I guess they've been in here before. But this is one of the rooms that are not paid. And as you see, this is kind of the way that this has been structured is that there's only a certain number of people that can be inside this network because people are actually doing a live attack, live hacking, and breaching of Active Directory. So it's a very, very fun room actually, but it does require a paid membership. And there's always the option for you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you can just follow along with us in these videos as we go along and just do it on your own machine. So if you have a Windows machine, then you can just use your own Active Directory inside your Windows machine and do everything that we're doing. So that's always an option. And in either case, I definitely recommend that you kind of follow along in these videos instead of just watching. There are some videos that are like theory only and concept only. So I understand that part, but if you can follow along, I definitely recommend that you follow along. So without further ado, we are going to go into the introduction of the room. Microsoft's Active Directory is the backbone of the corporate world. It simplifies the management of devices and users within a corporate environment. And we're going to do a deep dive into the essential components of Active Directory. We're going to learn what it is, what the Active Directory domain is, what components go into an Active Directory domain, forests and domain trust, and a lot more stuff. It's actually a pretty hefty room, and it even includes a little virtual machine that I've already started, and so it's available for us whenever we get into it. So let's talk a little bit about Windows domains. Picture yourself administering a small business network with only 5 computers and 5 employees. In a small network, you probably are going to be able to configure each computer separately without any problems. You will manually log into each computer, create users, and make specific configurations for each employee's accounts. If a user's computer stops working, you can probably go to their place and fix the computer on site. While that sounds like a very relaxed lifestyle, let's suppose that the business suddenly grows and has 157 computers and 320 different users across 4 different offices. Are you going to be able to manage each computer on a separate entity, manually configure, do all the stuff previously? Probably not. So to overcome this, we can use a Windows domain. Simply put, a Windows domain, is a group of users and computers under the administration of a given business. The main idea behind a domain is to centralize the administration of common components of a Windows computer network in a single repository called Active Directory. That the server that runs the Active Directory service is also known as a domain controller, excuse me. So you have the Windows domain, which is everything in here, and then you have the domain controller, which is the server that runs Active Directory and a bunch of other things as well. So the main advantages of having a configured Windows domain are you have centralized identity management and managing security policies. So you get to manage all the users across the network from Active Directory with very little effort, with being in one location in front of a computer, basically. And then you can configure security policies directly from Active Directory. And and apply them to users and computers across the network as needed. A real-world example, if it seems confusing for a second, chances are you've already done this at some point in either school, university, or work because a lot of places use a Windows computer. In school and university networks, you're often provided with a username and password that you can use on any of the computers available on campus. Your credentials are valid for all the machines because whenever you input them into the machine, it's going to forward the authentication back to the Active Directory where your credentials are checked. Then, thanks to Active Directory, your credentials don't need to exist on each machine and are available throughout the entire network. So Active Directory is also the component that allows your school and university to restrict you from accessing the control panel or anything that might be sensitive. Policies, which is specific to Active Directory, and we're going to talk about that a lot, will usually be deployed throughout the network so that you don't have administrative privileges over those computers. Now, during this task, we're going to assume the role of the new IT admin at THM Inc. As our first task, we have been asked to review the current domain THM local and do some additional configurations. And you will have administrative credentials over a pre-configured domain controller to do the tasks. And be sure to click the start machine. We already did that. This is going to be our username and password. And when we connect via RDP, the THM administrator is going to, so THM is the domain and then administrator is the user. It's going to show up like this. So if you use RDP, that's what it's going to show up as. And when you want to log in as such. And typically that's what it is. So when you see the user, there's usually a domain that they're a part of on a Windows machine. And that first section before the backslash is the domain name itself. So since we're going to be connecting via RDP, this is also a good time to start the attack box unless you're using your own machine. And that is not what I did. So let me see what the split view here looks like, because I think the split view actually shows us the machine itself. Yeah, it does have the Windows machine starting up. So I think we're going to do some things using the attack box to kind of run some exploits and do stuff like that. So this is basically when the Windows machine looks like, and it's like this. So very, very tiny. I'm gonna just zoom out on this so we actually have it in a new window. There you go. That's a little bit more manageable. And then while that's running, I'm gonna just start the attack box so we also have access to that. And I will shrink this while this loads because it takes a couple of minutes for that to load. And okay, so that's the basics of the Windows domain. So in a Windows domain, credentials are stored in a centralized repository called Active Directory, and the server in charge of running Active Directory is called the domain controller. So those are our review questions for this particular task. So moving on to Active Directory. The core of any Windows domain is the Active Directory Domain Service, ADDS. This service acts as a catalog that holds the information of all of the objects that exist on the network. Objects specifically could be users. We have, so right here, so we have users, groups, machines, printers, shared folders, and a lot of other things. So users are basically, as it says, it's just going to be the objects known as security principals, and meaning that they can be authenticated by the domain and can be assigned privileges over resources like files or printers. So you could say that a security principal is an object that can act upon resources in the network. So you can have users can be represented by two types of entities. There's people, so you, me, the manager, the CEO, so on and so forth, right? Then you have the services. So you can also define users to be used by services like MS SQL or IIS. And every single service requires a user to run it. But service users are different from regular users because they only have privileges needed to run the specific service that they're supposed to be running or managing. Then you have machines. Machines are another type of object. For every computer that joins Active Directory, a machine will be created. Machines are also considered security principles and are assigned an account just like any regular user. This account is also limited on rights within the domain itself. The machine accounts themselves are local administrators on the assigned computer. They're generally not supported, but they're not supposed to be accessed by anyone except the computer itself. So this is called the system uh, privilege. So when you have system privileges or you're inside the system user, you essentially have all of the privileges that that machine would have to run itself, so to speak. But as with any other account, if you have the password, you can log into the system privileges or the machine itself. Machine account passwords are automatically rotated out and are generally comprised of 120 random characters. Okay, so that's, or I think that's also referred to as a hash. I don't know if that's what they're referring to here, but we can talk about that a little bit later. Um, Identifying machine accounts is relatively easy. They follow a specific naming scheme. And so it's like DC01, so domain controller machine 01, also known as DC01 and a $sign, right? So that's kind of the gist of machines. And then we have security groups. Security groups are a way to manage people's permissions very easily, which is really, I mean, so you have the domain administrator, right? So they have administrative privileges over the entire domain by default. They can administer any computer on the domain, including the domain controller. Then you have server operators, which is like the next level down. And users in this group can administer domain controllers. They can't change any administrative group privileges. Then the next level down is backup operators who are allowed to access any file, ignoring the permissions of the file. They are used to perform backups of data on computers. Then you have the account operators who can create and modify other accounts in the domain. Then you have the users, so the domain users includes everybody in the domain. Then you have domain computers, includes all existing computers in the domain. And then you have domain controllers, which includes all domain controllers on the domain. So the domain itself, right? So these are security groups, right? So these are people who manage the domain controller, right? And these are people who manage the entire domain, including everything. And the reason why this is important is that more often than not, you can probably find somebody like this when you're doing penetration testing. You can find a domain user, but then you're going to have to escalate your privileges to try to get to domain admin, right? Or some kind of like really privileged account so that you could do some, quote unquote, malicious activities. So we can get the complete list of default security groups from Microsoft documentation, and feel free to go check that out. And to be able to access it, you can literally click the little search button, the little magnifying glass, and search for users, and it'll be Active Directory users and computers, or anything. You could search for Active Directory, anything like that, and it'll just bring that up. And it's a point and click application just like this, which is pretty freaking, like, it's really useful, honestly. It's like very, very useful, very amazing to be able to use. And it works in kind of like a hierarchy type of a format. So THM local in this instance would end up being the local machine or the local domain. And then under that, you have the organization THM, and it's called an organizational unit, just so you can see right here, OU, organizational unit. And so we have an OU called THM with 4 child OUs for the IT management and marketing and sales departments, which is all these guys right here. And so if you open this up, inside the IT department, there's going to be a bunch of machines and there's going to be a bunch of users, and same thing for everybody else over here. And then you can have the users that are also a part of THM, or you can mix and match this in a lot of different ways. You can set up the hierarchy of this in a lot of different ways. And what I've done before has been creating everything just based on the department. And then within that department, there are certain machines that are available and certain users that can do certain things and so on and so forth. So it's pretty standard to run it by department or by organizational unit. And then from there, you manage everything else. So if we go to the machine here and actually click on this little search and search for Active Directory, we would be able to just pull that up, and then from there we can even go into everything that we just saw and kind of just click around, right? So here we are, and in the sales department there's these 4 users, and if we wanted to just add somebody to the sales department while on the file, on the folder itself, you could go up here and you could either go excuse me, there's a button right here. So create a new user in the current container, create a new group in the current container. So you can have subgroups inside these groups, you know what I mean? And a bunch of other things. Create a new organizational unit in the current container. So there's a lot of things that it's just very intuitive and super easy to do. And you could go in here, and once you click on that, now you see all of these guys. You can also navigate by double clicking the item in there, and then we can navigate by double clicking Thomas, and it brings up Thomas's properties, right? So you can change his name in here, you can change his phone number, his email, you can go into, where is it, security. I think there's a portion for security right here. Maybe it's member of, so we can say which groups he's member of. We can go into his account and say that this is his actual logon username, and we can change that over here. You can set the account options on here where it says, you know, it expires never, or it expires at the end of so and so because he's a temporary contractor that he needs access for a certain period of time. The telephone number, the organizations that he's a part of, the environments that he would be a part of, more and more and more information. So there's a lot of great ways that you could just point and click and manage a user, or point and click and manage an organizational unit. And even so, we could, if we click on search and development, we see that there's Bob in here. Marketing has Mark. That's funny. Marketing has Mark from marketing. Management has Daniel, and IT has Claire, Mary, and Philip. And then we could right click on this. Then we can manage the properties in here. You can delegate control to this. So if you do this, you can go over here and you can go to the delegation wizard and you say, okay, who do you want to give delegation permission to this? And then I could go right here and I could search by anybody. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, so just to kind of show you, but you could search for just a first name and it'll say, yeah, this is the user that I found, or maybe a list of users. Who do you want to add to the permissions of this? And then you do that. And then if I just continue down this path, I can literally give him permissions to do a bunch of things on this particular organizational unit. Now, we're not going to do that, but it's that simple. It's that easy to manage Active Directory. So now you can kind of see why so many companies use it as their premier organization management, user management, right? So it's just super easy to do. So we talked about this, so feel free to right click on THM OU and create a new OU under it called students, just for the fun of it. I guess we could do that. So we're going to go here and then click an organizational unit right here, and we're going to call it students, which is us technically, and protect the container from accidental deletion. That's always a fun thing. And so you do that. Now we have a new students folder, right? If you open any organizational units, you can see the users they contain and perform simple tasks like creating, deleting, or modifying them as needed. You can also reset passwords if needed, which is very, very useful for the help desk. And there's a lot of other things that you can do. So there's a lot of default containers apart from the THMOU. These containers are created automatically by Windows. So built-in computers, domain controllers, users, and managed service accounts, which is all of these things right here. And those are usually just created by the computer itself when you set up a new domain. And then you have security groups versus OUs. So OUs are handy for applying policies for users and computers, which include specific configurations that pertain to sets of users depending on the particular role in the enterprise. A user can only be a member of a single OU, which we just saw, as it wouldn't make sense to try to apply 2 different sets of policies to a single user. Security groups, on the other hand, are used to grant permissions over resources. So for example, you will use groups if you want to allow someone to access a shared folder or a network printer, and a user can be a part of many groups, which is needed to grant access to multiple resources. So that's what I was trying to do, but that didn't work because I was doing it as just transferring them from their current organizational unit to another organizational unit, which kind of doesn't make sense. So now, which group normally administrates all computers and resources in a domain? That would be the domain admin. What would be the name of the machine account associated with a machine called Tom PC? And so this is basically it. You just put a $ at the end of it, and that's the way that it's set up. So it shows us that specific structure right here, right? So the machine is named DC01, and they'll have a machine account called DC01 $. And last but not least, suppose our company creates a new department for quality assurance. What type of containers should we use to group all quality assurance so that policies can be applied consistently to them? And that is called an organizational unit. So pretty intuitive, like fairly easy to understand. If you go through, if you have ever used a Windows computer, you've been a part of an organizational unit for sure, especially in some kind of a school or work environment. But most likely, if you actually have a Windows computer, then you can do this right now. You can literally just go create a new group and add some dummy accounts to it or dummy users and stuff, and just play around just to see what it looks like, because it's very, very easy to do, as you just saw me do. So managing users in Active Directory is one of the big tasks as an administrator. And so what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to check for the existing OUs and users, and some changes have happened to the business apparently. So we've been given the following organizational chart and are expected to make changes to AD to match it. So there's Mark in marketing, there is Sophie and Thomas in sales, and there is Philip, Mary, and Claire in IT, right? So we got to delete some extra organizational units and users. The first thing we got to notice that there's an additional department in the current AD configuration that doesn't appear in the chart. So we've been told that due to budget cuts, we're going to remove that department with the delete. That's how quickly you can delete somebody out of an organization. If you try to right click and delete it, you're going to get the following error that you don't have permission to delete the such and such organization. So first we got to go to advanced features and we got to turn off the permission that we had originally when we created the students folder, right? So it said protect objects from accidental deletion. We got to turn that off for the unit that we have to delete, and then we're going to be able to actually delete it. So first, let's go ahead and do that. So it says we need to only have marketing, sales, and IT. So we're going to go here. So there's research and development. That's one of the ones that we definitely got to get rid of. So we're going to go here. We're going to go to view advanced features, and then within advanced features. So when you go into advanced features, a bunch of new things comes up, including, of course, the original THM. And so we're going to right click on this now and see if we can go to properties and see if within properties we have something that we can use right there under object. It is protect objects from accidental deletion. We're going to apply that and okay. And then we got to do the same thing for students because we also did that for students. So we're going to go to the properties of students and we're going to click on object and turn that off as well. And that should be all good. So now if we try to delete these two, so if I click one and then press control, no, I think I got to do one at a time. So I'm going to go do that and I'm going to delete. And it says, do you want to delete? Yes, I want to delete research and development. It contains other objects. Are you sure you want to delete it? Yes, I do. And then same thing for students. We're going to go ahead and delete them. And they should be gone because we didn't have anything else that was in there. And so just like that, we are now done with the advanced features, or at least with the deletion of that specific group, right? Or that organizational unit. So after deleting it, you should notice that for some departments, the other users in the AD don't match the ones in your organizational chart. Create and delete users as needed to match them. So we got to go back here and just see who else needs to be here because there's a few people that we got to fire now. Got to get rid of a couple of people. So Mark stays in marketing because he's the only one that was in marketing. And yeah, and then so in IT, I think there was a couple of people in IT. Yeah, so Mary, Philip, and Claire are going to stay in IT. And then we have Sophie and Thomas in sales. So we got to get rid of somebody in sales. So there we go. So we only need Sophie and Thomas. We're going to get rid of Robert and Christine. Can we delete both of them at once? Let's see. Do we want to delete these guys? Yeah, we do. Just like that, they're fired. So there we go. And we matched our organization, I think. So we got IT, management, marketing, and sales. So we got management is Daniel. Oh, let's see who else is in management. Yeah, Daniel. Daniel is the only one. So management, IT, marketing, and sales. These are the only organizations that we are left with. So now let's talk about delegation. So let's talk about delegating certain controls. And we did that as well already. We kind of did like a glimpse of that. So one of the most common use cases is for granting IT support the privileges to reset other low privileged users' passwords. According to our organizational chart, Philip is in charge of IT support. So we'd probably want to delegate control of resetting passwords over the sales, marketing, and management OUs to Philip. So for this example, we're going to delegate control over the sales OU to Philip. And to do that, you're just going to right click on sales, click delegate, and then something's going to pop up, and then we're going to click add, and then we're going to search for Philip, click check names, and then once that is done, we're going to say reset user passwords and force passwords change at the next logon. So that's going to happen for Philip, and then there it is. So now we should also already have our attack box, but we're actually doing PowerShell as Philip. So that part is kind of irrelevant. We don't even need the attack box right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to first do that so that we can get him his privileges and his delegation. And then we're going to use his account to try to reset Sophie's password. So here's his current credentials. And then when we go via RDP, we're going to see Philip as the username. And you want to change that on the, obviously it's going to be Philip on the THM domain. So when you, while you may be tempted to go to Active Directory users and computers to try to test Philip's new powers, he doesn't really have the privileges to open it. So you'll have to use other tools to do password resets. In this case, we're going to be using PowerShell command line. And so that's it. So you do set AD account password for Sophie. We're going to reset, and it's going to be a new password. And then read host as secure string. The prompt is going to be new password and verbose. And so the new password, I think we are going to leave blank. So since we wouldn't want Sophie to keep on using a password, we know we can also force a password reset at the next logon with the following command. So set AD user change password at logon, true identify Sophie verbose. So first you're going to set the command that she needs to do it, and then you're going to, we're going to set the password for her, excuse me, we're going to reset the password for her, and then she has to reset her own password the next time that she logs on so that we don't know her password anymore, right? So now, once we've done all that, we're going to log into Sophie's account with the new password and retrieve a flag from Sophie's desktop. So first, let's go and give ourselves delegation permissions over the sales department to change passwords, reset user passwords. So we're going to go here. We're going to right click on sales. We're going to click on delegate control. This is going to pop up. You're going to click next. And for the user, we want to add Philip from IT. Oh, I didn't check the name, but there's only one Philip apparently, and it immediately added him. And so next we're going to give him some permissions, which is reset user password and force the password change. We're going to click next a couple of times, finish. And so now he has that permission to actually do it. So now what we want to do is we want to open up PowerShell and we want to attempt the command that they just gave us, which is set account password Sophie reset, etc., etc. And then the new password we're going to get. So let me see if I could just copy paste this to make life a little bit easier for us. So if I go here, if I do Control V, will it paste? It does not paste. If I right click, it does not paste. So For this, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna actually open up the side thing, the split view, excuse me. So that way I could just do it real quick. No, not on the attack box. We need it on the computer here. So I'm going to real quick type up this command since I can't do it through the copy and paste. And then we're gonna do this command as well. And then we're going to log into Sophie's account and retrieve the flag from Sophie's desktop. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, so there's the new command that we just put in right here, and we're going to zoom in just to kind of give it to you. And I mean, it's the same, it's literally the same thing that was on the screen. So set the Active Directory account password for Sophie, reset it. We want a new password, and we're going to read the host as a secure string, and the prompt is going to be a new password, which is exactly what just happened after I pressed enter, and it's going to be in verbose mode. And so I'm just going to give her a basic password. It's going to be Superman1 exclamation enter, and that should complete that. And so there we go. On target, yada yada yada, it finished. So now that we've completed that, we're going to do the second piece right here, which is the change password at logon for Sophie. And there's this one. So we have set AD user, Active Directory user, change password at logon, set it to true so that she has to actually do it. And then the identity is for Sophie, and it's going to be verbose. So we press that, and there you go. That's all done. So now what we get to do is we get to log out of Thomas and then log back in, or excuse me, log out of Philip, excuse me, and then log back in as Sophie. And then when we do, there should be a flag on Sophie's desktop. So I'm just going to click here, click this thing right here. I'm going to sign out. And from here, I'm going to be disconnected. That's great. So reconnect. Okay, I guess maybe for this, we needed the attack box for this portion, right? So I'm just going to open up attack box, and I'm going to use something which is very easy and simple to do, and it's actually one of my favorite tools. It's called xfreeRDP. We're going to use that to log into Sophie's machine with her new password, and all I need is the IP address right here. And this is what the command is going to look like right here. And that's the command. So xfreeRDP. And then you just do user Sophie password Superman1 exclamation and then V for virtualize. And it's going to be that thing. And the username and password is incorrect. Okay, try again. Oh, I see, because I think it needs to be THM in the front right here. So THM Sophie, there you go. And then now if we do Superman 1 exclamation, the user's password must be, okay, changed. So we're gonna do Superman 1 exclamation. We'll do Batman 1 exclamation, Batman 1 exclamation. Just like that. And we're gonna sign in. And password has been changed. Great. So now let's log into Sophie, and there's a flag on her desktop. And we just double click the flag, and there's the flag. Thank you for contacting support. So just like that, we were able to delegate control, and we were able to change the password. We were able to force change somebody's password by assigning the password ourselves. And then from there, we gave them the command that on the next logon, they have to change their password. And then we used xfreeRDP to actually log into Sophie's account. And then we changed the password again. And from that, we got the flag. So the process of granting privileges to a user over some organizational unit or Active Directory object is called delegation. And that is this particular task. So easy enough, right? Nothing too crazy. I'm just going to close this thing out so I don't confuse myself. And then this is the specific login for administrator, I think. This is the administrator account that we're in. And so we're going to use let's use Philip's account to try to reset Sophie's password. Oh, you know what? I didn't use Philip's account. I ended up using the account that I was already in, which was the administrator account. So I should have at least done that. But you already saw how I did RDP. So this was kind of the whole idea to see how to log in as RDP, as remote desktop. And so you saw how we did it for Sophie. You would do the same thing for Philip. I was logged in as administrator, so obviously I had privileges to be able to do that. But to kind of give yourself the extra step of practicing some more, you can do go into the attack box, do xfree RDP, use Philip's username and password, and then once you're logged in as Philip, you would open up the PowerShell, and then from PowerShell you would run these commands, and then set a temporary password for Sophie, then run these commands so that you can force her to change her password and log on, then log out of Philip, or just basically close that RDP session, and then click the terminal one more time, run xfree RDP one more time, but this time do it as Sophie, the way that I just did, and then from there you would be able to retrieve the flag on her desktop. So I kind of removed that one step because I forgot that I was logged in as administrator, and so that way I kind of skipped that, and it was a little quicker, so I guess that part of it is okay. But um, apart from that, you know exactly what I did, so you could just repeat that process first for Philip, and then after you're logged in as Philip, run these commands, and then log in as Sophie, and then you can retrieve the flag. So that's basically the process and what we did, and that was managing users in Active Directory. So now we're going to go into managing computers in Active Directory. Managing computers in Active Directory is kind of essentially the same process, really, as managing users. All the machines that join a domain, except for the domain controllers, are going to be put in a container called computers. If we check the domain controller, we'll see that some devices are already there. So if I go back to here and reconnect to this thing real quick, we should see that inside of our Active Directory, there's already some computers inside the little tab that's called computers, right? So we're going to go into THM local real quick, and then there's a computer tab right here, and then there's a bunch of computers, and the computers for Philip, Sophie, Thomas, Claire, Daniel, Mark, Mary, so on and so forth. So let's just make sure that our teams are right, and the teams are right. So okay, so everything's all good. So now we can stay inside the computers, and let's see what's going on here. So we can see some servers, which is the SRV right here, and some laptops, some PCs, and having all the devices there is not the best idea, since it's very likely that you want different policies for the servers as well as the machines that regular users can use on a daily basis. So we need to create several units inside of the computers. I'm assuming that's what's happening. So since there's no golden rule how to organize them, an excellent starting point is segregating devices according to their use. In general, you'd expect to see devices in at least three categories, which is workstations, servers, and domain controllers. And since we are tidying up AD, let's create two separate OUs for workstations and servers. And domain controllers are already in an OU created by Windows called domain controllers, which is this thing right here. This little thing right here, it says domain controllers. So the domain controllers are already in there. So all we need to do is we just need to create two different ones called workstations and servers. And then from that, we're going to just transfer the machines in there. So it should be fairly simple. The key note here is that we're going to be creating them directly under THM local domain. In the end, you should have the following OU structure. So it's going to look like this, right? So first, let's just go do that real quick. It's going to be right under the THM local. So we just want to make sure that we're clicked on THM local. And we're going to create a new thing called workstations. And then we're going to create another one called servers. Just like that. Oh, whoops, I did it under workstations. I wonder if I could just drag and drop this to THM local and see if that'll move automatically. It can't because access is denied. So now I have to go in here and I have to go into advanced settings or I'm already in advanced features. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to properties. And from properties, I'm going to go to the object. I'm going to protect from accidental deletion. I'm going to apply that. And I'm just going to delete this thing real quick and just make sure that I am no longer in workstations and I'm actually in THM local. And from here, I'm going to do another one called servers. And there's that. Okay, that worked well. So now it says after organizing the available computers, how many ended up in the workstations OU? So we are going to transfer what? Everybody that is from computers, we're going to transfer who? We're going to transfer Philip, Sophie. Can I do a, yeah, I can hold down Shift and it'll do multiple. So it's going to be the laptops for Philip, Sophie, and Thomas, and then everything up until Mary right here, which is 7 people. And we're going to transfer them into workstations. And yes, I do want to transfer them. Great. And so we're going to transfer the servers as well inside to the servers right here. And that should be right here. Domain controllers are separate. So there's AD Basics, which is our domain controller. And that's all separate. And now computers is empty. So it seems kind of odd, but it's okay because we have 7 workstations, which is all good. And we have 3 servers, which is all good. So that is all good. So after organizing, there's 7 in the workstations OU. Is it recommended to create separate OUs for servers and workstations? Yes, it is recommended to do that. And we just did that. So that was easy. That was very straightforward and easy to do. And so now we're going to move into group policies because we just created some new groups for our different workstations and servers. We also have different groups for our users. So let's talk about group policies. Group policies, since we've organized all of the users and computers, the main idea behind this is to be able to deploy different policies for them. So we can push different configurations and security baselines if we have different policies in their own departments and in their own organizational units. So Windows manages such policies through the group policy objects. And it's a different thing. So it's not inside the Active Directory Manager. It's inside Group Policy Management. And it's basically a simple collection of settings that can be applied to OUs and GPOs, Group Policy Objects, or contain policies aimed at either users or computers, allowing you to set a baseline or specific machines and identities. So to configure them, we're going to go to Group Policy Management, and then from here, we're going to be able to see that there's a bunch of different, it's very, very similar to the other view where it's hierarchical, yeah, I think that's what it is. There's a hierarchy basically, and it's under the THM local domain. And then there's the default domain policy. There's the remote desktop policy. Domain controller has the default domain controller policy. And then we have the group policy objects for the other things that we can just create manually. So this is essentially what the overview of this looks like. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to create some policies for the groups that we just made, right? So let's see what the whole idea here is. So first, let me actually go into the Group Policy Manager, and then we'll kind of run through the rest of this in detail. All right, and here we go. Very similar. It looks really similar, doesn't it? This is Group Policy Manager, and this is the Active Directory Manager. It looks very, very similar. So in this situation, we are now, let me just make sure I'm in the right one. So Group Policy Management is where we need to be. And so, it says right here, we can see that there are 3 GPOs that have been created from those. The default domain policy, the RDP policy are linked to THM local because you could see them both here. So there's default domain policy. It's right under the domain controller in THM local. And then there is the RDP policy that's literally right under THM local as well. So both of them are there. And then there's the default domain controllers policy that's under the domain controllers tab. So these are the group policies. All these 3 have been assigned to something. And then when you look at this in the section right here, and then I'll just do that so you can see it. So we have the group policy objects, default domain controllers, default domain policy, RDP policy. But then if we just do the drop down on domain controllers, it says that it has the default domain controllers policy assigned to it. And if we look at THM local right here, this also just has its own 2, but they're literally these ones that have been here, right? So everything gets kind of created underneath this, and then you assign them to THM local or whatever organizational unit you want to assign them to. So it says something important to have in mind is that any GPO will apply to the linked organizational unit and any sub-organizational unit under it. For example, sales will be affected by the default domain policy, right? Because sales is under the default domain, which is THM local, right? So it's hierarchical. It's literally the hierarchy of all of these OUs. And so if there's one applied to the entire organization, the entire domain, that specific thing applies to everybody within that domain. And then each individual department is also going to have its own set of policies. That's kind of how that works. So let's examine the default domain policy to see what's inside it. And the first tab you're going to see is the scope. So it says the scope basically means where does it apply to or who does it apply to. And in this particular case, it's the linked to the Active Directory. For the current policy, we can see that it has been linked to THM local domain. So right here. And then you can modify this accordingly, right? So the scope is who it's connected to, who it applies to. And then we can apply security filtering to GPOs so that they are only applied to specific users, which is right here, the security filtering, authenticated users. By default, they will apply to authenticated users, which includes all users and PCs. The settings tab includes the actual contents of the GPO and lets us know what specific configuration it applies. As stated before, each GPO has configurations that apply to computers only and configurations that apply to users only. In this case, the default domain policy only contains computer configurations. So let's go look at that real quick just so you can kind of see what that actually means. So we're going to do default domain policy. You click on that and it shows you the scope, and it says it applies to the THM local domain. And then if we go to settings, under settings it's going to generate everything because it's a pretty long list of things. And then so you see how there's nothing under user configuration down here. There's no settings that have been defined, but there's general settings, and then there's the computer configuration settings that have been defined. So policies, Windows settings, security settings, and you can drop this down, and there's going to be more stuff in here. So account policies and password, and it shows you right here. So enforced password history, 24 passwords remembered, maximum password age is 42 days, meaning that after 42 days, you got to reset it. Minimum password age is 1 day. Minimum password length is 7 days. Passwords must meet complexity requirements, of course. Stored passwords using reversible encryption disabled. So that's really, really important. This part is like a big security thing, right? You don't want this to be reversible. You don't want the encryption of the password to be reversible, meaning somebody could get the hash and reverse that encryption, and now you know what the password of the domain controller is, right? That's not a good thing to happen. So that's very important to kind of understand what these little features actually mean, right? So we did explore it a little bit, and so you can either expand using the show or the hide button, or you could just literally click on it and it will expand it or contract it. In this case, the default domain policy indicates really basic configurations that should apply to most domains, including password and account lockout policies. So we looked at the password policy, and then we can also even look at the account policy or the account lockout policy, which says account lockout threshold 0 invalid logon attempts. So I guess you can get logged out after 1 invalid logon attempt, right? So since this GPO applies to the whole domain, any change to it will affect all computers. Let's change the minimum password length policy to require users to have at least 10 characters in their password. So we're going to go and right click on it, on the domain itself, or the group policy for the domain. We're going to right click and then we're going to click edit. And then we need to go to computer configurations. We're going to go to policies and then Windows settings, security settings, account policies, and then password policy. So once we click edit, a new window is going to open up, and then within that, we just got to go down this policy or this hierarchy until we can find it, and then from there, we're going to just change the password policy, right? So let's go into that. We got this. We're going to go here. We're going to right click. We're going to click edit. It'll open up a new thing for us, which is right here. So we're going to do computer configuration. We're going to go to policies, and we're going to do Windows policies, I believe, or Windows settings, excuse me. And that's going to expand. And then we're going to kind of show this up a little bit. It was under security settings, and then from security settings, so account policies, and then password policy. And you just click on that, and it shows you right here. So it says minimum password length. We want to change this. So we're going to go to properties here and just change it to 10 characters and define this policy setting. There we go. And click OK right here. That should be our individual setting changed. So as you can see, plenty of policies can be established in GPO. While explaining every single one of them would be impossible in a single room, do feel free to explore and kind of click around. And again, if you have a Windows computer, then this is in your computer. You don't need a virtual machine. You don't need anything like that. You could just start clicking around your different policies, and you can click around Active Directory and do all of that stuff. And then there's even the great part of it where you can actually look at the explanation of what it is, right? So if more information is needed, you can double click on each one and then just look at explain. So if I just go here and double click on this, something's going to pop up. And then I think it's the same thing as when we right click and go to the properties, and it's right here. So it explains minimum password length. This security setting determines the least number of characters that a password for a user may contain. You can set a value between 1 and 14 characters, or you can establish that no password is required by setting a number of 0 characters. So 14 characters is the maximum, and this is, as a hacker, it's kind of important to know. It's important to know that a Windows machine, and depending on which version of Windows we have here, a Windows machine could maximize the number of characters that a password could have. And then from that, you know what type of attack you need to employ to be able to break in, right? So GPOs are distributed to the network via a network share called sysvol, system volume, which is stored in the domain controller. All users in a domain should typically have access to this share over the network to sync their GPOs periodically. The sysvol share points by default to Windows sysvol directory on each of the DCs in the network. Once a change has been made to any GPO, it might take up to 2 hours for computers to catch up. If you want to force any particular computer to sync its GPO immediately, you can always run the force command. So gp update group policy update force. And then you can just run that, and you would need to run it from the domain controller, I would assume, in order for that to work. So creating some GPOs for THM Incorporated is going to be as simple as the following, right? So as a part of the new job, we have been tasked with implementing some GPOs, and one of them is to block non-IT users from accessing the control panel. The other one is to make workstations and servers lock their screen automatically after 5 minutes of inactivity so that people don't get logged into. The first one is going to be the restrict access to the control panel. So we're going to create a new policy called restrict access to the control panel. And then we're going to open it for editing. Since we want this to apply to specific users, we're going to look under user configuration. And it's right here, right? So the first one was computer configuration. That's the last thing that we did. So now we're going to go to user configuration, policies, admin templates, and control panel. And then from there, we're going to do prohibit access to control panel and PC settings enabled, right? So let's just make sure that we have the rest of this as well, because we need to apply it to certain groups, right? So once we've created it, we need to just drag and drop or just apply to individual departments. So management, marketing, and sales. need to have restricted access to the control panel. So let's just do that real quick before we move on to the one where we lock their screens after 5 minutes. The first thing that we got to do, we're just going to close this out. We're going to go right here under group policy objects. We're just going to make sure that we actually click on group policy objects, and then there should be a button that says new, and if it doesn't, then we just create one manually. So we're going to go here, we're going to click on new, and then it's going to be restrict access to control panel, and there's that. So right click on it and then click edit, then you go to user configuration, you go to policies, and then you go to admin templates, and then you do control panel, and inside that it says prohibit access to control panel and PC settings. So that is what we want to turn on. So we're going to create edit on this, and then we're just going to do enabled, and that's pretty much it. And you're going to click OK, and that should be all good. So now we have our group policy set up. So what we need to do is we need to apply it to certain groups, right? So you do a drop down here, and then we can just drag and drop into management. Yes, we want to apply that to these people. Then we want to drag and drop to marketing, and yes, and we want to drag and drop to sales. Yes, just like that. Easy. How easy is that? Very, very easy to do. Unbelievably easy to do. This is one of the things that I really love about Active Directory, is that it's so freaking easy to do. Because of that reason, a lot of companies use it. And so since that is the case, this is why we're going through it, just so you understand how it works, because the very next thing that we're going to do is going to be breaching Active Directory, right? Because remember, we're not doing this just to be sysadmins. We're doing this because we want to understand how this works so that we can go ahead and breach Active Directory and hack Active Directory. That's the whole idea here. So you got to understand how it works so that you know what to do to attack it. You see? Understand the rules so you know how to break the rules. It's kind of a big deal right there. Okay, so auto lock screen group policy. So we're going to create another one. For the first GPO regarding screen locking, we could directly apply it to workstation servers and domain controllers that we created previously. While this solution should work, an alternative consists of simply applying the GPO to the root domain, as we want the GPO to affect all of our computers, since all of these guys are actually children, child OUs, child organizational units of the root domain. So it's much simpler to do drag and drop once instead of drag and drop, 3 times, which is, it's still not a big deal, but it's just you apply it to everything inside that domain. And then what happens is that it applies to every new person that comes in. It applies to every new organization that you create. So it just makes it very, very simple and perpetual. It's permanent. And no matter what or edits you make into the organization, that group policy will apply permanently to everybody, right? So you might notice if the GPO is applied to the root domain, it will also be inherited by other things like sales or marketing. Since these guys contain users only, any computer configuration in the GPO will be ignored by them. Let's create a new GPO called auto lock screen, and we're going to edit it. And the policy that we want to achieve is located in the following route. So it's going to be under computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, and security options. So we're going to first create something called auto lock screen, and then we're going to go in this path to go ahead and modify this so it's changed into 5 minutes. And if you see right here, it's 300 seconds, so it counts in seconds, it doesn't count in minutes. So 5 times 60 would end up being 300, and that's how we achieve that. So let's go and create the auto lock screen real quick. So we're going to go to group policy objects again, and we're going to create a new one, and it's going to be called auto lock screen. And auto lock screen needs to be edited, so we're going to create that. We're going to do edit. We're going to go to computer configuration, policies, Windows settings. It's going to be under security, and then it's going to be under, what was it, security, local policies, and under that there's going to be security options, and under here we need to find the thing called interactive logon machine inactivity limit. So it's going to be under I, interactive logon, machine inactivity limit is right here. And we're going to go into properties for this thing and define it. And we want it to be 300 seconds. There we go. And if we click on explain, it'll tell us, right? Windows notices inactivity of a logon session, and if the amount of inactive time exceeds that inactivity limit, then the screensaver will run locking the session. And just like that, we have applied it. So now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and take this lock screen and apply it to the domain. So you just drag it up here and you apply it to the THM local domain, and now it shows up right here. The auto lock screen is right here. And just like that, how simple is that? And let's just make sure that we actually have it. So, or not even that. So if I actually just click on this, it'll tell me what has been applied to it, right? It's auto lock screen. We go to settings, and then it says that there's a computer setting under security settings, local policies, other, interactive logon, machine inactivity limit, 300 seconds, just like that. So super cool, super easy to do. I genuinely love the fact that this is so simple and easy to do. So now let's do a little bit of a test run here. So it says, once the GPOs have been applied to the corrective use, we can log in as any user in either marketing, sales, or management for verification. For this task, let's connect via RDP using Mark's credentials. And can I copy his password? Well, so what was the IP? It's 10.10.180.46. Okay, 10.10.180.46, and then this is his password. So let's do connect via RDP to Mark. We're gonna go to our attack box. Okay, so the attack box is loaded, and I can basically just do an up thing right here, since I already used the previous the IP already to log in as Sophie. We can just change it to Mark and log in as Mark. So I'm just gonna go here, see if I can just paste this password in the middle right there, perfect. And then we're gonna go back and just change our name to Mark, and we can do THM Mark because that's what it said, right? So that's, and we got an error last time. Remember when I did just Sophie, we got an error as trying to log in as Mark or as Sophie because I didn't include the THM at the beginning. So I'm going to do THM / Mark as the username, and then it's going to be the password marketing 21. And so if we just press enter now, there we go. Oh, it still gave me, I guess, oh, interesting. Okay, well, THM / Mark, and the password is going to be marketing. So can I paste the password in here? I can't. Can I do Control V? I can't. So I have to actually manually type his freaking password, this guy. Okay, so M4RK3T. And there we go. So we got that. So now what we want to do is we want to try to open the control panel to see if we can actually do it, if we can actually use it. And I need to actually expand this to the full screen so that we can see the full window here. Now click on here. Control panel is right here. This operation has been canceled due to restrictions in effect on this computer. Please contact the sysadmin. So the policy that we set in place is actually working, which means we did our job right. So that's always great. So what is the name of the network share used to distribute GPOs to domain machines? It is called sysvol. And can a GPO be used to apply settings to users and computers? And the answer is yes. So there we go. We ran it and it worked very well. So we did our job right. I like it when things work. That's always really fun to do. Okay, so now let's go into authentication methods. This is where it gets interesting in the perspective of the hacker, of the attacker. Okay, so these are the things that we need to be aware of because this is how users and domain controllers and machines and all these things get authenticated within Active Directory. Okay, there's something called Kerberos and there's something called NetNTLM. So Kerberos is a recent version of Windows, and we would argue that it's the more secure version of the authentication method, and it's the default protocol in any recent domain. Then there's NetNTLM, which is the legacy authentication kept for compatibility purposes, and it's, as the name implies, it's a legacy. It's the older version. It's been kept for compatibility, but it's also probably the weaker version of these things. And I have done exercises, I think it was the John the Ripper video, where we went through using NetNTLM to decrypt people's passwords and to be able to find the clear text version of their passwords, because it was the NetNTLM algorithm that was used to lock them up. So Kerberos is the default authentication for any recent version of Windows. Users who log into a service using Kerberos will be assigned tickets. Think of tickets as a proof of a previous authentication. Users with tickets can present them to a service to demonstrate they have already authenticated into the network before and are therefore enabled to use it. So when Kerberos is used for authentication, the following process happens, right? The client with the user requests the ticket getting ticket or ticket granting ticket. That's basically what it says. So it says I'll just read this instead of trying to paraphrase it. So it says the user sends their username and a timestamp encrypted using a key derived from their password to the key distribution center. Then a server usually installed on the domain controller in charge of creating Kerberos. Oh, that's the key distribution center. So that's where they send their username and a timestamp encrypted using a key that they got from the KDC. The KDC will create and send back a ticket granting ticket, okay, which will allow the user to request additional tickets to access specific services. The need for a ticket to get more tickets may sound a bit weird, but it allows users to request service tickets without passing their credentials every time they want to connect to a service. Along with the ticket granting ticket, a session key is given to the user, which they will need to generate the following requests. Now, the TGT is encrypted using Kerberos TGT account password hash, and therefore the user can't access the contents. It is essential to know that the encrypted TGT includes a copy of the session key as a part of its contents, and the KDC has no need to store the session key, as it can recover a copy by decrypting the TGT. Sounds complicated, I understand. And the first time that I read through this, I was like, what? What did you just say to me? But when you kind of go through it, and I think reading it out loud and trying to explain it for somebody who would be learning it is helping me learn this even better. So I'm grateful for you being a viewer in more ways than one. But so this is the visual representation. So the client, which would be the user, right? Us. We have our user hash, and then so we send our username along with a timestamp that's been encrypted, and we send it to request our ticket granting ticket. Then the KDC, which is our domain controller, basically, the key distribution center inside the domain controller, takes the Kerberos TGT hash and the user hash, and then it sends the ticket granting ticket and a session key back to the user. And so when this happens, because we have our ticket granting ticket and then we have our session key, now we can access services on the domain without actually having to use our username and password multiple times, so on and so forth. So this is the essential process here. Now, when a user wants to connect to a service on the network, like a share, website, or a database, they will use their ticket granting ticket to ask the key distribution center for a ticket granting service. The ticket granting service are tickets that allow connections only to the specific service that they were created for. To request a ticket granting service, the user will then send their username and a timestamp encrypted using the session key along with their ticket granting ticket, and a service principal name, which indicates that the service and the server name that we need to access, right? As a result, the key distribution center will send us a ticket granting service along with a service session key, which we will need to authenticate to the service that we want to use. The ticket granting service is encrypted using a key derived from the service owner hash. The service owner is the user or machine account that the service runs under, which is typically the domain. The ticket granting service contains a copy of the service session key on its encrypted content so that the service owner can access it by decrypting the ticket granting service. So, session key with the ticket granting ticket that we just got from this whole process. We're going to submit that with our timestamp, the ticket that we got, and the specific thing that we're trying to use, right? So the MS-SQL, for example. And then we're going to request a ticket that grants service. And then the KDC domain controller is going to use its hash and the service owner hash for this service. And it's going to send us a ticket that grants service along with the session key for that specific service. And this is all to keep track of what's going on as well as authenticate, right? So I hope you can kind of gather that, is that the reason why there's a timestamp is that they say, hey, this user at this time requested permission to do this. And so if the system, for whatever reason, submits the ticket granting either another ticket or granting another access to a service, if the system does that incorrectly to the wrong person, then they can track back and be like, okay, well, at this time, this thing happened, and then everything has a session key that's associated with it. So everything tracks. You see what I'm saying? This is all for tracking purposes as well as authentication. So the ticket granting service now can then be sent to the desired service to authenticate and establish a connection, and the service will use the configured account's password hash to decrypt the ticket and validate the service session key. And so we send it like this, and now we get access to the service that we want. NetNTLM works using a challenge response mechanism, so it doesn't really use tickets much. So you use at the beginning, so you send your authentication request, and the server will send a challenge. And the challenge, along with the hash that we got, ends up being a response. And then you submit your response. And then the server will send the challenge as well as the response to the domain controller. And the domain controller takes that and processes that. And it says, is this okay or it's not okay? And if it's okay, it's either going to allow or deny authentication or allow or deny access, right? So that's basically it. So it's more likely, more often than not, asking for some kind of a challenge, which is basically the password in a lot of cases. So the client sends an authentication request, the server generates a random number and sends it as a challenge to the client. The client combines their password with the challenge, or their password hash, sorry, their NTLM password hash, with the challenge and any other data to generate a response to the challenge, and then sends it back to the server. The server will follow that, will forward that, to the domain controller for verification, and the domain controller uses the challenge to recalculate the response and compares it to the original response that was sent. And if both of them match, the client is authenticated, otherwise they're denied. And so the authentication result is sent back to the server, and then the server forwards the authentication result to the client. This, although at first glance, when I saw this, I was like, this seems like it would be more secure, but it's not, because there's several steps along this way that somebody who's an attacker could step in and be that man in the middle and capture some of this information and poison the information, right? Or use the information. So let's say not even poison it. Let's say that they capture the information and they use that information to go in and authenticate themselves as a user. Now, let's say the user that's trying to do this is an administrator, then you're in trouble. That somebody caught the administrator's hash and they were able to capture that information and leverage that information to get access to your servers and your systems, so on and so forth. So It's kind of a big deal. So the note right here is that the user's password or hash is never transmitted through the network for security. The described process applies when using a domain account. So if a local account is used, the server can verify the response to the challenge itself without requiring interaction with the domain controller, since it has the password hash stored in its SAM. And we've already done this as well, where we've taken copies of the system and the SAM, and we've taken used that to hack into systems. So this is all it's technical. It's very technical, but understanding why these things work the way that they do is how we can accomplish the hacks and the attacks that we can. So will a current version of Windows use NTLM? And the answer to that is no. When referring to Kerberos, what type of ticket allows us to request further tickets known as a ticket getting service? And that would be the ticket granting ticket. When using NetNTLM, is a user's password transmitted over the network at any point? It's not, but the data that correlates with that is. So the password isn't. Okay. All right. Now that we have accomplished this, we are going to move on to trees and forests and trusts, and we will be done with this room, and then we can do some of the fun stuff, which is to breach Active Directory. So that's where it gets kind of fun. So let's move on. So far, we have discussed how to manage a single domain, the role of a domain controller, and how it joins computers, servers, and users, right? So this is the domain. You have the root domain controller, and then you have the machines and the users, so on and so forth, and everything's inside one domain, right? You have one domain. As a company grows, so does the network. So having a single domain for a company is good to start, but in time, they need more domains. And that's where trees come in. It's basically multiple domains connected together, right? So it supports something called, I missed the thing. So let me just read this. So it says that luckily Active Directory supports integrating multiple domains so that you can partition your network into units that can be managed independently. If you have two domains that share the same namespace, so THM local, these domains can be joined into a tree. Then if our THM local domain was split into two subdomains for UK and US, you could build a tree with a root domain of THM local and two subdomains called UK THM and US THM, with each with their own ADs, with its own computers and users, right? That's called a tree. Now, this partition structure gives us a better control over who can access the domain. The IT people from the UK will have their own domain controller that manages the UK resources. And for example, a UK user would not be able to manage US users. In that way, the domain administrators of each branch will have complete control over their respective domain controller, but not other branches' domain controllers. Policies can also be configured independently for each domain. A new security group needs to be introduced when talking about trees and forests. The Enterprise Admins group will grant a user administrative privileges over all of an enterprise's domains. Each domain would still have its domain admin and the domain admin privileges over the single domain and the enterprise admins who can control everything in the enterprise. Forests, as you can kind of guess, are going to be multiple trees, right? So you have THM local with UK and US THM. Then you have MHT local, which is basically this backwards, right? MHT local with Europe and Asia, right? So in different namespaces, that's basically what the main difference is. So suppose the company continues growing and eventually acquires another company called MHT. When both companies merge, you will probably have different domain trees for each company, each managed by its own IT department. The union of several trees with different namespaces into the same network is known as a forest. So the main difference is that they have different namespaces, but essentially their functions are going to end up being the same, and there are two different trees that have been functioned as a forest. Now, there's something called a trust relationship, right? So Having multiple domains organized in trees and forests allows you to have a nice compartmentalized network in terms of management and resources. But at a certain point, a user at THM UK might need to access something from MHT Asia. For this to happen, the domains that are in the trees and forests are joined together by something called a trust relationship. In simple terms, having a trust relationship between domains allows you to authorize a user from THM UK to access resources from MHT Europe. The simplest trust relationship that can be established is a one-way trust relationship. In a one-way trust, if domain A wants to access, if domain A trusts domain B, this means that a user on domain B can access stuff on domain A. Okay? The direction of the one-way trust relationship is contrary to the access direction. So if I trust you, that means you can access my stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you trust me, allowing me to access your stuff. Does that make sense? A two-way trust can also be made to allow both people or both domains to mutually authorize users from the other. By default, joining several domains under a tree or a forest will form a two-way trust relationship so that everybody can get access to everything. It's important to note that having a trust relationship between domains doesn't automatically grant access to all resources on other domains. Once a trust relationship is established, you have the chance to authorize users across different domains, but it's up to you what you actually authorize or not. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they get access to everything as soon as there is a trust established. It just means that now you can give them permission to access certain things, right? So what is a group of Windows domains that share the namespace? They share the same namespace is called a tree. And then what should be configured between two domains for user A, for user in domain A to access a resource in user in domain B, and that's called the trust relationship. So that's kind of an overview of trees and stuff like that. But again, just looking at it from the perspective of the hacker, if I'm in Europe and I want to get access to something in this company, so it doesn't matter if I'm in Microsoft Europe, right? If Microsoft Europe has a trust relationship between Microsoft US, and I know that there's somebody in Microsoft US that I'm trying to exploit, as long as there is that trust relationship and there's been authorization granted. So it's trust relationship as well as there's authorization granted. So if you can find that, then from Europe, you can get into the local Microsoft tree and then traverse your way or work your way through to getting Microsoft US. And then from there, you work your way out and get whatever you need and bounce, right? That's obviously overly simplistic and it's way more complicated than that. But that's kind of the idea here, is that this is possible because of the fact. So the simplicity makes it also vulnerable. That's the key, right? So it's simple. It's really easy to use. You can drag and drop things and connect things and so on and so forth, but it also makes it really vulnerable. So that's the whole idea here. And that was trees, forests, and trusts. In conclusion, we have shown the basic components and concepts related to Active Directory and Windows domains. This should only serve as an introduction, obviously, and there's quite a bit more to explore to implement a production-ready Active Directory environment. If you are interested in learning how to secure an Active Directory installation, be sure to check out the Active Directory hardening room, which is going to be released soon. On the other hand, if you want to learn how attackers can take advantage of this, there's the compromising Active Directory module, which I don't think is the same as breaching Active Directory, but it might be. There's certain things. So this is actually a part of the whole module. There you go. So I've done the first 4 of this. I haven't done all of this, so I'm pretty excited about this. So we're going to do breaching Active Directory as kind of a refresher. Then we're going to do enumerating, and then lateral movement and pivoting. And then there's exploiting Active Directory, persisting Active Directory, and harvesting credentials from Active Directory, which is going to be a very fun path to follow. Honestly, I'm very excited about this. This was a free room that was available inside of TryHackMe, and as you just saw, there's multiple other free rooms that falls under this topic. So I highly recommend that you get access to them and just have fun with it and learn some great things. There's also the paid version because as you just saw, there's also multiple VIP rooms that were not accessible to people with free accounts. So to be able to do that, you would need to get a paid membership and it costs 12 bucks. But if you use the link in the description below, you'll get a discount on top of that. So it would end up being from 12, it'll go down to 7 because you get a $5 credit towards it. And so you can get access to all of the free rooms, obviously, as well as all of the VIP rooms. Now, if you want to just follow along in your own machine, in your own computer, you're also more than welcome to do that because a lot of people have access to Microsoft computers. And that way you can just follow along with the videos and try the exercises as we're trying them in a video. All you got to do is like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified when a new video comes out, and then you can follow along the rest of the module or the rest of the pathway for that. And that's how we are going to figure out how to do these things together if you don't necessarily have a TryHackMe account. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers. I hope this was a fun introduction to Active Directory for you. It was definitely a great refresher for me, and some of the more complicated concepts were a little bit easier to grasp this time around. So watch it over if you need to, review certain things if you need to, but definitely make sure to follow along because we're going to now go into some of the deeper stuff with Active Directory and just exploiting Microsoft and all that good stuff. So peace, love, and chicken grease. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you, and I will see you in the next video. Later.